Hello and welcome to Making a Home. In this episode we're going to be talking a little bit about that random outbuilding out in the garden, which is eventually going to become my studio / office space. At the moment it's just completely full of random crap and the roof leaks like a sieve, so it's pretty much unusable for anything at all at the moment. So the first thing we need to do really is try and essentially make it watertight so that we can dry everything out, and then we can remove all of the random stuff that's in there and start thinking about how we are going to renovate it. So because the roof is completely full of holes, it really is just going to be completely pointless to try and repair that. So I'm just going to take the whole roof off and put a new roof on. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later in the video. But first, let's go back to just after we moved in and take a look at the state of play of things at that point. So we've had a lot of rain over the last couple of days and the floor of the studio area is just completely and utterly soaking wet. You can see here this bin is just covered in water, and there's a big pool of water here at the back as well, just lying on this table here. And if you look up at the ceiling you can actually just see it dripping through these boards here. So clearly there are leaks going on all over the place in this roof. It really is just completely and utterly past all usefulness. So really the very first thing we have to do is try and get this watertight, because all of this water on the floor is going to be doing no good whatsoever to the concrete, and it's going to be getting into all the walls. We need to dry this place out essentially before we can start doing anything else. And without removing the roof and replacing it completely, the only thing we can really do is put some kind of cover over the top of the roof to try and stop it getting wet, and that will hopefully allow all of these beams to dry out and get the floor dried out. So it's really no wonder that this roof has been leaking, because look at all this stuff that's just been piled on the top of it, right in the middle. And there's not just wood, there's some steel here as well, I can see. Yeah, I mean this is weighty stuff, all weighing down in the middle of the roof, so it's really no wonder that it leaks. So it's pretty difficult to believe, but all of this crap, and also this, whatever this is, was all on the roof, all of it. Not only that, but I noticed that there are some gashes in the lining of the roof, which I think happened when they slid this stuff up onto the roof. So not only did the weight of it break the roof, but they actually broke the roof just by putting it up there in the first place. Honestly, these people, they never cease to amaze me. So this is looking a lot better now. I've cleared off all of the stuff, and basically what I'm trying to do is just let it dry out a little bit. I'm hoping the weather will stay dry and some of this water can just evaporate. And then I bought a tarpaulin, which I'm going to put over the top, and hopefully that will stop the water from getting through this damaged roof and will allow the interior of this room to dry out a bit. So that's a reasonably good job done. This is only a temporary solution, this is not going to last all that long, but the idea is just to dry the roof out a bit and also dry out the concrete and stuff in there. Hopefully it's not going to make too much flapping noise in the wind, that's why I've put these planks over the top of it, just to try and hold it down a bit. But it's tacked all the way around, so it should be relatively stable even when it's windy. So let's talk about the plans for the new roof. Here we have a mock-up of the studio building, which I just put together in SketchUp. Obviously it's not perfect. The brickwork doesn't really look like that in real life, but it's a close enough approximation. And I've done all the measurements to make sure that it is the correct dimensions. So if you look at the side profile of the building, you can see that there's actually currently a fall towards the back of the building, and that's because rainwater currently drains off the back of this roof. That is actually a terrible idea, because behind this building is a paved walkway which runs behind all the properties, and there is essentially nowhere for the water to go when it comes off the roof. So when it rains heavily, you just end up with big puddles of water just standing here behind the building, and those of course will then wick into the floor and up the walls. There is a damp course along the brickwork at the bottom, which is good, but that amount of standing water is always going to create problems even if you do have a damp course. So the plan is to change this and put in a new sloping roof which slopes towards the front of the building. And then what we'll have is some gutters running along the front, and we'll actually collect all that rainwater in a water butt, and we can use that for watering the garden. So the first thing we need to do is level the walls. So I've added in a little bit of a wall topping here. So what that will essentially amount to is another layer of bricks along the back here, and basically I'll fill in the sides with concrete so that the whole top of the wall is level all the way around. And then what we can do is we can put a wooden roof plate on the top of that, which will then be secured to the walls. The roof will be fairly heavy, so I don't think we have to worry too much about uplift, but we do definitely need to tie it down in case of any storms or heavy weather of that kind. So on the top of this we will have some roof joists. Those will essentially give us our fall to the front of the building. This is a 4-degree fall, which is the minimum fall which is recommended for the box profile roof sheeting, which I'm going to use. Those will be secured in place by these struts, so that will just basically hold everything together. These ones in the middle are not actually strictly necessary, but they'll just help to tie everything together because there'll be quite a lot of weight hanging off the bottom of this. There's going to be Rockwool insulation and also acoustic plasterboard, so there's going to be quite a lot of tendency in the middle here for it to bow downwards. So if I just tie these together in the middle, that will obviously give it a bit more structural rigidity. Then on top of that we have our purlins, and that's going to be what the roof sheeting attaches to, and also helps to tie everything together and keep it rigid. And then we have our roof sheeting over the top of that, which is just going to be standard box profile roof sheeting, but it will be grey PVC coated sheeting, which will hopefully be a bit quieter in the rain, and it will also look quite nice. Then round the edge of that we're going to have some ply siding, which is just going to be a covering just to cover up the structure of the roof. That will be painted grey to match the actual roof itself. It should look quite smart. And then on top of that we're going to have barge board around the edge of the roof as well. That serves two purposes. It basically stops moisture coming in the side of the roof, and it also just aesthetically ties the whole thing together and keeps it looking nice and neat. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have some guttering along the front, and that will lead down into a water butt which will be placed at the front here in the corner, and that will collect any rainwater which is coming off the roof. And if we take a look here at the underside of the roof, we'll then have some ceiling joists which will be attached to the bottom of the roof joists, and that will be what the acoustic plasterboard will attach to, which will basically be under that like that. And then inside the roof space we will have acoustic Rockwool RW5 insulation, which is the highest density Rockwool that you can get. This is 100mm thick, and this should provide quite a good thermal and acoustic barrier between the noise inside and the roof sheeting outside. So that will just be fitted in between the roof joists and cut to fit around all the different timber structures, so that it forms a nice tight seal. So this is actually what is known as a cold roof design, because the actual surface of the roof itself will be essentially the same as the air temperature outside. All of the heat will be kept underneath this plasterboard and this insulation. And that will essentially mean that what will happen is moisture that wicks through this will condensate on the inside of the roof structure. So to deal with that, in these soffits under the back and the front here, there will be little gaps, air gaps, and that will allow air to essentially run front to back or back to front. The other thing is that this kind of roof sheeting inherently has little gaps in it anyway, in all of these little spaces here. So it's very easy for airflow to go through the underside of this roof and stop moisture from building up. So the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed that on this side of the building there is a bit of an overhang on the roof, whereas on this side there isn't. And the reason for that is because there is a bit of an anomaly with the way that this has been built. So you can see that on this side there's a bit of a gap between the edge of the building and the fence line, whereas on this side the building goes right up to the outside of the fence line. And that is because whoever built this assumed that the fence line on this side of the property is on the inside of the boundary, and the fence line on this side of the property is outside of the boundary. And that's quite a common feature in the UK, and what it means is that you are responsible for the fence on one side of the property but not the other. However, I think in this case the builder actually got it wrong, because we are actually responsible for this fence, and this fence is actually the neighbour's responsibility. Now, during the sale we didn't actually receive any clear communication on which fence is our responsibility. However, I have essentially deducted that it's this one because of the fact that if you look at this fence line and then you look at where the party wall is here, this fence line, it's a little bit difficult to see on camera, but this fence line is on the inside of the wall line. So that would indicate that if this party wall is the boundary between our property and the neighbours, this fence is on our property and therefore is our responsibility. Likewise, if you look at where this fence runs, this is the party wall on the other side of the property, and you can see that the fence line actually runs on the outside of that, on this side of the property, which would indicate that this fence is then on the neighbour's land and is therefore their responsibility. So yeah, not really sure on what the legalities are there, but the fact of the matter is this building has been here for quite a number of years, and I would guess longer than 10 years, in which case that is the time limit for any objections to be raised, after which time it's quite difficult to do anything. So I think we'll be alright. So that essentially means that on this side I really cannot overhang at all, because we're already on slightly dodgy ground with this. So if I extend any further this way, then I'm really definitely getting into the neighbour's territory there. So this has to be flush on this side. There's not really much I can do about that, or as close to flush as possible. Obviously I have to put the barge boards and the siding on there, so that is going to take it out a little bit, but hopefully by not more than about 20 mil or so, which is not really a lot. However, on this side we have a bit of a gap between this building and the fence line. So my plan is that eventually on the front of this building there's going to be some cladding, and that cladding is going to go all the way up to the fence line on this left hand side, and that's just going to even things out a bit and make it look a bit less lopsided, and it'll also tie this building into the fences which are going to go down both sides of the property. So this here is a basic mock-up of the kind of design that I'm hoping to go for. Most probably I will have to make these fences slightly shorter, because there is a limit to how tall you can make fences in the UK. So this will probably drop down a bit and this fence line will come along there, but essentially you can see that what I'm trying to do here is tie the front wall of the studio building into the fences so that it kind of looks like a continuous system going all around the property, and then we just have a door going into the studio at the back. So in terms of timelines, the idea is really to actually expedite this and get this done kind of as soon as possible, because that will allow us to free up the second bedroom, which I'm currently using as my studio / office, and we can make that into a proper spare bedroom, which we really would like to do. So yeah, essentially we're just waiting for some time and a bit of extra fundage, but really the idea is to do this before winter. So we'll see how that goes, but yeah, watch this space.